Well, I want to go through some of the book here. Like I said, it's a heavy read. You know, a lot of parts of it, well, we'll get into it. But I want to start at the beginning with where you started. And you say this: my life began in October 1960, 15 years after the end of World War II. World War II was fresh in the memories when you grew up. Poland was still a place of desolation and despair. People were still trying to rebuild their lives after the Second World War, but this time under the terror and totalitarian state run by communists and Marxists like my father.
Government told us what is yours is not yours, it's ours. They took everything we had: house, money, property. They made us work without payment, slaves. Life, food, everything was in the hand of communism.
That's where I spent the first years of my life, amid the rusting ruins of the old bombed out Poland and cheap scaffolding of the new.
Yes, and there was nothing unusual for me. I thought this is the way the life is. My father was very adamant about it. He said, look, the socialism is such a great system. For some reason, people do not like to subscribe to it. So we need to make people aware how great the system is. And when they still don't buy into it, we basically need to cancel them out of the society. We need to just silence them and say, what if that doesn't work? Then we need to physically silence them. That's my father's words. And there was nothing unique at the time. That's how my father perceived his role in society. When you say my mother was totally opposing the socialism and socialist state, because she understood it. She understood very well. She knows what happened in Soviet Union before the Second World War. But my father's mother hated socialism and communism too. And I talk about it. I remember she was the one who taught me how to pray to God. And we always pray to God to be good to everybody, to us, to help us get through these hard times, and to get the fucking communists out of the country as fast as they can. So it was like my father didn't know until when he heard it, he freaked out.
This is how you got to pray with your grandma for health, happiness, and liberation. Kneeling next to me, my grandmother would say things like, please send the communists back to where they came from, and please take the red Satan away from Poland. And I would repeat word for word after her. After repeating words a few times, I had to ask, who are these people? They are evil. They kill people and keep people in prison. Real demons. Fast forward a little bit in the book. Your father takes a job in 1967. You're 7 years old, and he basically abandoned you guys.
There was the desolation after the Second World War, and also the socialism economy that ruined Poland even deeper and put people into slavery.
You say on top of all this, we were often hungry. That loaf of bread my mother got, if she was early and lucky enough, you couldn't buy more than one loaf at a time. People could get violent if you tried. Yeah. This meant we were forced to learn ways to be less hungry. I learned to spot the school children of wealthy Communist Party members by their sandwiches.
Yep.
These were some good-looking sandwiches too. While my siblings were eating thin sandwiches with butter or margarine if there was no butter, often only sprinkled with sugar, these rich kids were eating theirs with fresh meat and all the best fixings, dressing smeared across their smug faces. Fast forward a little bit, you say by the time I was entering 8th grade, my mom couldn't afford to support me. By then, almost 13 years old, plus 2 other children, so she did the only thing she could do and sent me to live with my father.
Yeah, she didn't have much choice. I mean, we're growing, the food was expensive, and we were living in this little tiny apartment with 2 rooms, so just basically 1-bedroom apartment. So she had to do something, and she sent me to live with the father.
This is where you started learning to fight for the first time.
Yeah,
at the boxing gym?
I already went there. I started fighting right before I went to my father. So I joined the police boxing club. I was already pretty good, I had a good punch. I knocked quite a few people out, like that guy who beat my brother up. Just from the very beginning, I remember I didn't have an older brother, so I had to figure something out. So I found like a big steel pipe. I put in my bookcase when I was going to school, because kids used to follow me and just kick my ass around the block, or they push me at the entrance of the apartment and beat me up there. So later the word started spreading that those kids who follow me in my apartment somehow don't show up. The ambulance shows up, takes them out, because it was me with my pipe.
I'm going to fast forward a bit. By early 1981, after the communist government raised food and fuel prices and lowered working wages, Solidarity had a membership of about 10 million people and represented most of the Polish workforce. This is when my mom became involved with the trade union, and the first time in any Warsaw Pact country that an organization was formed independently from the regime, with real elections and everything. Through the union, strikes began, bringing entire industries to a halt. State-run companies were losing money, and they were deeply in debt to the West to boot. Desperate, the authorities tried to strike a deal with the unions. The agreement at the end of the day was to allow the trade unions to exist in exchange for fewer strikes.
Proszę pana, to i mnie wtedy trzeba przepędzić.
Nie możemy ulegać emocjom.
Nie ma takiej intencji.
What began as an economic protest became a demand for sweeping political concessions. The government negotiators gave way to the workers' key demands.
Mamy wreszcie niezależne, samorządne związki zawodowe.
This was just a ruse in preparation for martial law to take down the first independent trade union of the Warsaw Pact. At that point, I was more firmly entrenched with the anti-communist solidarity movement, and I'd regularly stay late at the headquarters at Lowe. Now that I was in my early 20s, I had a lot more flexibility to do what I wanted within constraints imposed by the regime, of course. And this is a historic day. On December 13th, 1981, around 10 in the evening, people started coming to tell us of their parents and other family members who were being arrested throughout the city. The state security police had come to their homes, and their family members were gone. We knew that something big was about to happen. We braced ourselves for whatever was going to happen next. People started calling their friends in other countries outside of Poland, trying to organize routes of escape and chains of communication in case things went badly for us. Someone at the HQ turned the TV on, mentioning something about a government message being broadcast. General Jaruzelski, who is more Soviet than Polish, appeared on the screen. He looked grim in full uniform with the Polish flag looming over his shoulder. The National Council, in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, has introduced martial law throughout the country, he read. This is the last chance to pull the country out of crisis and save it from disintegration.
that if the outrages in Poland do not cease, we cannot and will not conduct business as usual with the perpetrators and those who aid and abet them. Make no mistake, their crime will cost them dearly in their future dealings with America and free peoples everywhere. I do not make this statement lightly or without serious reflection. We have been measured and deliberate in our reaction to the tragic events in Poland. We have not acted in haste, and the steps I will outline tonight and others we may take in the days ahead are firm, just, and reasonable. In order to aid the suffering Polish people during this critical period, we will continue the shipment of food through private humanitarian channels, but only so long as we know that the Polish people themselves receive the food. The neighboring country of Austria has opened her doors to refugees from Poland. I have therefore directed that American assistance, including supplies of basic foodstuffs, be offered to aid the Austrians in providing for these refugees.
Fast forward a little bit. When the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, announced sanctions against the communist regime on December 29th, 1981, Poles, including myself, were cheering.
Yes.
Even further infuriating the communists and socialists. This is when the phrase was coined,
Im gorzej, tym lepiej.
Yeah.
Im gorzej, tym lepiej. The worse, the better.
the worse the better. It meant that the more sanctions put in place to ruin socialism and communism, the better for Poland, Poles, and freedom. Anything that even remotely hurt communists was cheered by the Poles. The Polish people were ready for any sacrifice just to get rid of the hated, oppressive socialism that my father worked so hard to put in place. Those of us who escaped or who were left out of the mass arrests met on the streets in the days following and discussed what we could do to resist the blatant show of terror and authoritarianism. The country was faced with news blackouts and total censorship, so we decided it was going to be important for someone to tell the truth of what was going on. We found one guy who had a typewriter and another who had a printing press, so me and a couple of my friends decided to report on what was happening on the ground. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking about what would happen if we got caught. Being found with an unregistered typewriter, or God forbid, a printing press, usually meant spending some time in prison. My newspaper was really only a double-sided single-page leaflet that we produced, but the messages it contained were dangerous enough that I could have been imprisoned. After printing a few hundred copies, we walked the streets pressing the uncensored newspapers into people's hands and leaving them in high-traffic areas of the city while desperately hoping one of the socialist sympathizers would not turn us in. Following the implementation of martial law, on that night, December 13th, 1981, in my city, thousands of us would turn off our city lights every month on the same day that started martial law to show solidarity against the regime. Whole city blocks would be completely dark except for a single candle in every window. 20, 30, 40 apartment buildings all in a row, each 20 to 30 stories tall, each window with a candle in it.
This is how people can, I guess, when everything is taken away from them, they still protest and they still show that what really is happening.
Fast forward a little bit, some resistance figures I knew quickly became very loud and outspoken, creating their own circles that people flocked to. New organizations were established every other day and just kept getting bigger and bigger. We didn't realize that some of these organizations were actually being established by the state security police, who collected names and information and were then able to arrest opponents of socialism in one fell swoop. Because my group was very small, no one thought to try and join us, let alone infiltrate us. We kept a low profile and covertly distributed our resistance literature out in the streets. I'm sure the police had been following us for a long time, but they didn't get anyone until early 1982 when I was walking toward the printing press down a tiny little street. He was maybe 100 yards away and staring directly at me. Of course, I thought that was strange, but I kept walking and got to the building. I climbed the stairs to the third floor. Suddenly I heard footsteps thundering over my head and a bunch of doors flying open. I had at least 8 or 9 guns pointed at my head. I'd only ever been in a holding cell. This was far worse, reeking of piss and shit and mold. There were people huddled somewhere in the dark, but I couldn't see anything. I stood there until someone called out, "Hey you, just sit down somewhere." There were food rations, but they were so small, I was soon painfully hungry. Apparently, others were in a similar state. One prisoner, a real mean-looking guy, came up to me sometime after dawn and said, "I'm going to eat your food today." I wasn't about to give him the chance, not even a slim one. I knocked him out. And when he was laid out unconscious on the ground, I carefully lifted his upper lip and using my knuckles, punched his two upper front teeth into drive the point home. No one was going to mess with me in here. I pulled the knocked out teeth from his mouth, put them in my pocket, and then I ate his food. I was interrogated for anywhere from 2 to 3 times per day, where they asked me the same questions over and over. While in prison there, the police raided my apartment and destroyed everything. They kept me there for 3 weeks, asking the same questions repeatedly, sometimes beating me when I didn't answer the way they wanted or didn't answer at all. At the end of my stay, they announced they had everything they needed to put me in jail for life and that I was soon going to the big prison. That same night, without explaining anything further, the police marched me out at 2 a.m. in handcuffs. The police kept moving, and under the cover of darkness, they hauled me out into the street and shoved me into the back of a civilian car. "Where are we going?" I asked. "When we get there, it won't matter to you anymore." The thought crossed my mind that maybe they were going to kill me. I prepared myself to fight, getting my blood up while I sat handcuffed in the back seat of the car. I knew it was a lost cause, but I would not go quietly. My plan was to hopefully knock out the 2 cops with a good kick when we got out and make a run for it. It was naive, but I had no other option. The whole time I was brainstorming, they drove for almost 4 hours in and out of town, over and over aimlessly until 6 a.m. when they brought me back to the cell at HQ. When I got back, confused by the change of plans and jittery from my adrenaline, I saw some of my cellmates were crying. They thought I'd been taken out and shot, and they were the last ones to see
yeah,
me.
That's how socialism works.
Mm-hmm. Fast forward a little bit. 4 weeks after my arrest, I was transported to an intermediate prison. The police investigation was done. Now they were gathering materials and evidence to build a case against me. The absence of a confession or any proof was no obstacle for the communist regime. If they lacked evidence, they would make it up. But even though I knew they had a bunk case against me, I still didn't have an attorney to help fight it. And going up alone against a corrupt justice system usually never ends well. The prison administration's intention was to break me down by putting me in the worst cell. The biggest guy of the group tried to strong-arm me into conforming to the cell's imaginary hierarchy of control. Of course, it did not end well for him. I applied a significant lesson I learned on the street. You finish the fight when you are done with the fight, not when he tells you he gives up. If you stop before submission, he could turn the tables and take you down. Despite this guy's screams to stop, I didn't. I kept beating him until he stopped screaming and stopped moving.
Fell asleep, yeah.
It says the discomfort of prison can't be understated. Beyond the outright violence, there were millions of little things that made life miserable for all of us. One of those things was that you couldn't just lie in bed. You had to either sit down on the floor or on the stool, but you could not lean on the walls or the beds. There were 4 beds per cell, 2 bunk beds. However, it was not meant for the 10 or more men that were actually in the small cell. When I'd first arrived, I didn't think much of it. And I was so tired and sore from my weeks at the state security police headquarters that I decided to lie down, even though the other prisoners told me I shouldn't. One of the prisoners said, "Don't do it or they will fuck you up." "Screw that," I said. I'm tired and I'm going to lie down. My cellmates were smiling and smirking at each other in anticipation of what was to come. I ignored them and started to settle into the bed, preparing for some relaxation. Sure enough, as soon as the bed, which was a little more than a wooden cot, creaked under me, the guards came down on us. My resting time was up. They pulled me out of my new cell and started to work me over. I could hear their punches echoing throughout the prison. As they landed on me, they beat me up and then threw me back in my cell. When they were done with me, I thought for sure this was the time when I laid down they would leave me alone.
Would you think otherwise? I mean, they just beat you up, right? You are really sore. You work in the cell, so it's natural. You need to lay down, right?
I was naive to think because I could barely sit straight that they would surely leave me alone and let me recover in my bed. It was not an act of defiance, not yet. However, it happened again. This time they beat me with rubber nightsticks in such a way as to not leave too many bruises. This methodical beating included multiple hits to my kidneys, and I ended up pissing blood as a result. Once again, they threw me back in my cell. This time I was 100% sure they were not going to mess with me. It was impossible for me not to lay down. I could not sit or stand or stay standing, so I went straight to bed. I thought they were going to leave me alone. I was wrong. They were not done with me. The cycle repeated itself. Again, you get in trouble, you're knocking people out, you're breaking shit, you're just being a freaking savage in there.
Well, some of it was just from the fear that if I fell, they would eat me alive there. So you just have to be the, you don't let, you need to be pretty much on the top. If you don't, then you have to submit to other people and stuff, and I would never let it happen. Besides, I had enough skills and I had enough expertise not to let it happen. So it was,
Yeah, you get this one time you get in trouble again. I was given a week of solitary confinement once again, but this time it was in the so-called tiger cage.
Tiger cage.
For a moment I wondered if there was a real actual tiger in the basement of the prison, but that was short-lived. When they walked me into the cell, I burst out with laughter. It was so surreal. Within the cell room, they did indeed have a real cage. It looked like a very large dog kennel. They could not understand what was so funny, and finding my humor in the absurdity of the situation did not endear me to the prison guards. Cell within a cell. The cage had steel bars as big as my thumb and a low clearance, so I couldn't stand upright. My only two options were to sit or lie down on hard steel. They tossed me in and my week started. I didn't hate solitary confinement, not completely. It was cold, dirty, dark. It smelled, and the only light in the room was always flickering or completely dark. I only had a tiny blanket and a wooden slat for a bed, but at least I didn't have to deal with other prisoners or guards for that matter. I spent only a few cold and uncomfortable days in solitary confinement before the prison guards came in. I thought they would I thought they would just send me back to my cell. To my surprise, instead they say, "We're putting you on a transport." That gave me pause. Where am I going? Russia, maybe. We don't know.
From Poland to Soviet Union, so I was scared. Yeah.
So what's the next prison you get sent to?
Hrubieszów on the Russian border. So I from my cell I could see the Russian side of the across the river. There was Hrubieszów prison. Yeah, that's where I ended up on the Russian border. Well, not quite in Russia, at least.
You say it was classified as one of the harshest prisons in Poland.
Yes.
The prisoners were separated by blocks, with common criminals being in different locations from the political prisoners. Prisoners also had more opportunity to interact with like-minded prisoners. It became a very educational environment as we were sitting in prison with many intellectual members of Polish society. Doctors, professors, physicists, economists, and engineers, as well as other hard-working Polish patriots. We all shared the same disdain for communism and socialism. One of the routines was to open the windows at 8 p.m. and the entire prison sang patriotic Polish songs that the state hated. Every night, entire prison blocks joined together in singing songs about freedom and independence. These songs carried into the small town and beyond. The local Polish population liked to hear this patriotic resistance. The guards tried to squash it, dragging prisoners away from the windows, but we persisted as there were not enough guards to stop all of us, and our determination was strong. In a cold, lonely place like that, morale was vital for our collective survival.
Nerving for socialist regime.
That sounds like a powerful thing to witness.
It was.
August 13th, 1982. We started a hunger strike for the recognition of our status as political prisoners. The regime had been hiding and denying for decades that they held political prisoners. The last thing they wanted to do is admit that the socialist state was holding political prisoners, especially at such a volatile time in Polish history. Instead, their propaganda was to show us all as criminals who committed common crimes. After a certain point in our hunger strike, once we'd wasted away a bit, the guards started to force feed us per prison regulations. They would drag us into separate rooms in the medical unit and tell us we had a choice. They could either shove a pipe down our throats and force feed us, or we could eat and swallow on our own. Either way, we had to eat. Most of us stuck to our guns and said no. That isn't what they wanted to hear. The feeding procedure was to bring the prisoner in, strap them to a wooden chair, and shove a corrugated feeding tube down the throat. Fast forward a little bit. The communist regime in Poland, following another visit from Pope John Paul II, announced amnesty for prisoners, including political prisoners like myself. I was freed from prison, but not a free man, not yet. Fast forward a little bit. And this was interesting to me. Even though I'd been freed from prison, I was still considered an enemy of the state. It lasted for only a few months. In the autumn of 1983, I finally decided to visit the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw and request political asylum and ask for help.
And it was such impossible thing for me to think that I could ever be allowed to leave Poland and come to live as a free man in America. You know, in America was always for me this country where people are free, that they can live their lives the way they want to. There is government not telling them how you have to live your life. But it was such a distance, such an impossible to even imagine that I can ever come to America. And so, but when these things happen, the way what you just said, I say, what have I to lose? I can go and ask for help. And that, but because it was emergency, then like they understood the urgency of it, and I was allowed to come to America very quick.
This is when I made a promise to myself that I would be the best citizen that America could have. It was my pledge to America, the greatest country in the world, the land of the brave and the free. March 21st, 1984, I landed safely, albeit exhausted, in America with the equivalent of 10 cents.
10 pfennigs, yeah. 10 pfennigs. There was German valor. 10 pfennigs is, I don't know, like maybe 5 cents actually, but it's like 10 cents.
I was picked up from the airport by a church family who had volunteered to host me while an apartment was being set up. That part didn't take long at all. Within the days of my arrival, I was brought to my new apartment near the projects in downtown Memphis. I was completely stunned. It wasn't the nicest place, but it was mine. And most importantly, it was America. For me, it was the most beautiful place on earth. The fact that I had suddenly had an air conditioning unit, central heating, and a refrigerator was mind-blowing to me.
The first, when I landed, it was the first time that it's like, they can't get me now. But then when I started living on my own, you know, I was a janitor at the time.
So that was your first job, you got a janitor.
I was a janitor, yeah. So I was cleaning the toilets, mopping the floors, and this was down on me. I can pay for my shit. I can pay for my apartment. But you know what, this is not all the story, because, you know, that would be maybe so easy for me. I had American people coming and helping me, basically. This is how you need to do this. This is how you need to do this. Do you need the clothes? My clothes were out. You know, I was making barely money because I was part-time janitor. So just enough to pay my apartment, my food, but like clothes and stuff, which American was bringing me. People I didn't know from Adam. They just feel that, you know what, he is in need. So we're gonna help him. And this is something that people here don't think about. They don't realize it even. It's so transparent to Americans, a goodness, being good to other people and helping other people. And sometimes I say, why you are helping this person? And well, that's where we are, you know. This is the way America is. You can help, you help. Just doing, because This is the way you were brought up as an American. Helping people, helping other people. And if you succeed, you help other people succeed. And this is well, but this is normal. This is how we are. Well, that's how we are. But this is normal. But this is not normal anywhere around the world. I told them about my escapade at this older couple, so they took me to the mall and say, this is where you go. Holy shit, I haven't seen in my life things like that. That was like everything there, you know? And these people like nice dress, you know, they're walking around and like nobody's chasing them. They don't try to just run into store and grab something like I was used to. You see something good, you just go and grab it. So I was like, wow, this is so great, you know? So then I was always like, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to the mall. So I was like, become like the permanent mall fixture, I think, in Memphis for a while, because I just couldn't have enough of it.
So you eventually get a job, in a car shop, a car dealership.
Yes.
You're pulling parts basically that they need.
Yeah. Oakley Kizzy Ford, those. Oakley.
Okay, there. And as you're doing that, your English isn't great, so you're kind of messing up some of your parts that you're pulling eventually.
So basically, the dealership, the Oakley Kizzy Ford, didn't want to fire me because I was working so hard. They knew my challenges, my English, but they liked me. So the opportunity show up in another dealership to be a mechanic, either for Porsche, Audi, or Saab. So they say, hey, you know, like, what do you think about? Do you know anything about foreign cars? Do you know the European cars? I was like, yeah, I didn't, but you know, I didn't even know anybody. None of my friends even owned a car, and I never owned a car for sure. And then my father only did, but he was never with us. I never seen that car. So,
but you're European, so you must know about European cars.
I came from Europe, so do you know about European cars? Like, yeah, and I just wanted to, you know, progress. I wanted to another opportunity, and I knew that I was not doing that great here. I was trying very hard, but just my ability was not quite there. But you know, banging with the tools and hammer, I can do that all day long. And so I decided, yes. And we went so they drove me to the dealership, and those two mechanics show up, first for Porsche, then for Audi. But they both look at me and it's like, you know what, the guy really don't speak English very well, and I need somebody who actually can get up to speed on these cars. They were very expensive cars to do something. So no, thank you. And so they say, okay, well, let's wait for the last one. That's the Saab mechanic. And here it is, you know, the rumble of Harley Davidson, and the whole dealership shook. So the guy just pulled in. We didn't know, I could hear him, but we didn't see him yet because we are in the office. And then the 6-foot-something Sasquatch shows up, fucking like Yeti, big guy. It's like, he just looked at me, he said, that guy? It's like, yeah. So me, do you want to be Saab mechanic? It's like, yeah. It's like, okay, I need a slave, so I take him as my slave. Go work for me. And I got hired, I got the job. And this guy, you know, they were afraid of him there often. They call him motorcycle gangster. He took me under his wings. Everything I knew and know about cars, even today, I learned from him. He basically allowed me to move on the next level in American society. I became a mechanic, and he made sure that I am damn good mechanic. And I remember, for me it was still very challenging. I had to read manuals. I had to connect the words that I read with the parts that I'm fixing and working on. So I figured out the easiest way will be to let him go and read the text for me. So we were already friends. I said, Jim, if you could, I would like you to read this manual for me loud. I will record it, so then at home I can repeat and read it over and over. I thought the professor was looking like, what the fuck is he asking me for? It's like, I thought he will kill me, but he says like, you know what? I help you. But if you tell someone that I was your bitch and reading your books, I'm going to fucking kill you. I was like, I'm never telling anybody. I think he doesn't mind now. I can tell, but at the time, yeah, he was the biggest, baddest guy I think I met till in my life. So he told me everything I know. He knows about cars. He made me good mechanic.
There you go.
James Moore.
James Moore. So you end up with that job. You end up getting a job then with Mercedes. Time's going by. You went on a date with some girl, and she had just been skydiving.
Yeah, you know, like I never thought even this possible. It never crossed my mind. But here I meet the girl, and she jumps. So now I feel like a pussy next to her. It's like, what the hell? So we talk about it and say, why don't you try? And it's like I think there was one of the times, like unlucky moments that, yeah, nothing is stopping me. Why wouldn't I try?
This is America.
This is America. You can do whatever you want to do, of course, within the limits of the law, being the good citizen. So I made the first tandem jump and said, fuck, I need to do it again. So went back again. And then I just ran out of money for the weekend. So I said, like, I want to start skydiving. And they say, okay, when can I start? We can start on Thursday. So we make a Thursday jump. Then maybe you can make one on the weekend. Then maybe another Wednesday, maybe another weekend. The 7 jumps goes AFF, and you're good. Then you can start jumping on your own. Oh fuck, I started on Thursday, Saturday I was jumping on my own. We just went through all these jumps. I was just nagging, begging them, saying, hey, don't leave yet. One more jump. So the instructors, Tommy Kinder, rest in peace, brother.
So you're learning that. You're learning free fall. You also at this time are studying to become an American citizen.
Yes.
And you memorize all that information. You learn the American history.
Yes, because there was exam later. Yeah.
And as you're doing that, the war kicks off. The first Gulf War kicks off. You become a citizen of America, May of 1991.
Yes.
Now the war's going, or looks like it's going to go off, and you decide you're gonna go fight.
Yes,
You're
yes.
able-bodied American.
I'm American. This is my country in war and need. So I will support my country. I will fight war for America. And this is when I decide to join military. I never intended to spend, to do career out of it. I just wanted to fight war on behalf of America because America was at war. So I had to do that. And I had no distinction between Army, Navy, military. Military was military to me. There was like Army, Navy, I didn't know any difference. There is a difference. So I went to Army officers. There's Army, so I'll go there. They send me there and they fill the paperwork. They proceed the paperwork with all this background check and everything. It took a while. And in the meantime, when they already completed pretty much everything, they came in, the Navy SEALs came into Memphis, Tennessee. And we jumped together.
It's like the jump team, right?
Yeah, it was a jump team, the leapfrogs. They were doing some demonstration in Memphis, so of course they stopped by our drone zone to make extra fun jumps. Mm-hmm. And this is how I find out. They told them what I'm intending to do, and they're like, well, why don't you go and ask the Navy, go join the Navy, because ask them about Navy SEALs. I need to do that. And I stayed there. And I was good because I graduate as a #1 recruit in this whole graduation cycle. So I will receive the Military Excellence Award, #1 recruit, and was sent off to A school, the parachute rigging school.
And what was, you got a kidney stone during boot camp,
Yes,
right?
yes.
They got laid up, almost got rolled back.
Yes. So I didn't know what the kidney stone was. I never had one, I was not that educated. I was laying in the bed and one night, it just like the pain just kicked me right so badly in my back that I fell off that bunk from the second bunk on the floor. And it was like, it was already dark because we were sleeping. They say, call the medic, because I couldn't speak, it was so painful. I passed the test, so I was going to medical checkup for the Navy SEALs. And I went maybe like 2-3 stations, and the doctor looks at it and say, well, I think your SEAL career ends right here. It's like, well, yes, sir. I was begging, saying, no, please send me back. I'm good. I pieced this stone out. I have no problem. I'm good. And they decided, they allowed me to come back. The funny thing was like inspiring for me. So when I walked into the group, because they announced to the company, to these recruits, that I would be moved to class behind. I had a medical emergency and I'm not going to be continuing. And then I'm walking in. So they were like a line up, and I was walking there. Everybody was clapping, and it was so inspirational to me. These young kids, these young guys, and they like that. I'm back in their company.
And you say this after the probationary period, passing the SEAL board.
Yeah.
Made up of chiefs and officers, we were awarded the SEAL Trident. In the morning muster, in front of the entirety of SEAL Team 2, we were called up front and center and were presented with the coveted tridents in the presence of Admiral Joseph McGuire. He's an admiral today. Back then he was a commander.
Yeah.
It was a great milestone in my life. It was a great moment, but it also made me reflect on many things. It was crystallizing in my mind that this could only happen in America, such an exceptional country. Only in America is it possible to come without even knowing the language and carrying only a bag of clothes and still succeed through hard work and determination. As much as I was proud of my SEAL Trident, there was an even greater honor that was bestowed on me before. It was American citizenship. The citizenship and American flag encompass the Trident. I was a Trident wearer because I was an American.